Let's Murder the Moonlight by F.T. Marinetti, April 11th, 1909, Part 1. Hail, great incendiary poets, you futurist friends. Hail, Paolo Buzzi, Federico de Maria, Enrico Caviccioli, Corrado Gavoni, Libero Altomare. Let's flee the city of paralysis, devastate gout, and lay the great military railroad along the flanks of Gori Sankar, summit of the world. We left the city with firm and nimble strides, as if dancing in our desire to find everywhere obstacles to overcome. Around us and within our hearts, the immense intoxication of the old European sun as it swayed between wine-colored clouds. The sun struck us in the face with its great torch of flaming purple, then flared out, vomiting itself into the infinite. Whirlwinds of aggressive dust, blinding mixture of sulfur, potash, and silicates, through the windows of the ideal, fusion of a new solar orb that soon we shall see shining. Cowards, I cried, turning toward the inhabitants of paralysis who were heaped below us, an enormous mass of angry howitzers awaiting our future cannons. Cowards, cowards, why all this howling like cats skinned alive? Are you afraid that we'll set fire to your hovels? Not yet. After all, we'll need something to keep warm with next winter. For the moment, we are content with blowing up all traditions, like rotten bridges. War? Very well, yes. War is our only hope, our only reason for living, our only desire. Yes, war, against all of you who are dying too slowly, and against all the dead who are clogging the streets. Yes, our nerves demand war and disdain women, because we fear the supplicating arms will entangle our knees on the morning of departure. What do they want? Women, sedentary people, invalids, the sick, and all counselors of prudence, to their vacillating lives broken by dismal agonies, by fearful dreams and burdensome nightmares. We prefer a violent death, and we exalt it as the only one worthy of man, the beast of prey. We want our children to follow their whims, to struggle brutally against the elderly, and to ridicule anything consecrated by time. Are you offended by this? Are you hissing at me? Raise your voices. I can't hear your insults. Louder. What did you say? That we're ambitious? By all means, because we don't want to rub up against your stinking fleeces, your reeking and mud-colored flock driven down the old, decrepit streets of the earth. But ambitious isn't the precise word. We're more like artillerymen on a spree, and however much you hate it, you'll have to get used to the thunder of our cannons. What did you say? We're insane? Hooray! Finally! The word I've been waiting for. Oh, oh, what a travail. Carefully pick up that massively golden word. Get back into line and hide it deep in your little shop rooms. Holding that word between your fingers and your lips, you'll be able to live another 20 centuries. For my part, I'll tell you that the world is rotten with wisdom. And that is why today we are advocating daily methodical heroism, a taste for desperation, for which the heart gives everything it has, a habit of enthusiasm, abandonment to vertigo. We advocate a plunge into shadowy depth beneath the white and staring eyes of the ideal, and we ourselves will furnish the example, abandoning ourselves to the furious seamstress of battles, who having sewn us into a handsome scarlet uniform, garish us in the sun, will anoint our hair with flames, our hair brushed back by bullets, just as the heat of a summer night spreads the field with the undulant shimmer of fireflies. Every day men must electrify their nerves to a fearless pride. Men must stake their lives on a single cast, not watching for cheating croupiers, or checking the balance of the roulettes, but bending over the vast green carpets of war, sheltered by the luck-bearing lamp of the sun. The soul must, do you understand, launch the body into flames against the enemy, like a fire ship against the eternal enemy that we would have to invent if it didn't exist. Look down there, those ears of grain aligned for battle by the millions. Those ears, agile soldiers with sharp bayonets, glorify the power of bread that is transformed into blood, which shoots straight up to the zenith. You must know that blood has no value or splendor, unless it has been freed from the prison of the arteries by iron or fire. And we will teach all the armed soldiers of the world how blood should be shed. But first we have to clean out the great barracks where you are teeming, insects that you are. It'll be easy. Meanwhile, you monkeys, you can still go home tonight to the filthy traditional pallets on which we will never sleep again. As I turned my back, I could sense from the pain in my spine that for too long, in the great black net of my speech, I'd be dragging along that moribund populace, like a heap of fish that are flapping ridiculously beneath the last flood of light, thrown by the evening against the cliffs of my forehead. Part 2. The city of paralysis, with its henhouse cackle, its impotent prides of truncated columns, its puffed-up cupolas that bring forth commonplace and petty statues, the whimsy of cigarette hazes that curl above childish bastions seemingly offered to a slap. It disappears behind us, dancing to the rhythm of our swift steps. Ahead of me, still a few kilometers away, the madhouse suddenly came into focus, high on the ridge of an elegant hill that seemed as frisky as a colt. "Brothers," I said, "let's rest for the last time before we move out to construct the great futurist railroad." We lay down, all of us enwrapped in the immense madness of the Milky Way, in the shadow of the palace of the living, and suddenly the clamor of the great square hammers of space and time went still. But Paolo Buzzi was unable to sleep, because his body kept giving a start, pricked by the poisonous stars that assailed us on every stride. "Brother," he murmured, "drive away these bees that are buzzing around the purple rose of my will." Then he sank back to sleep in the visionary shadow of the palace, crowned with fantasy, from which wafted the soothing and ample melopea of eternal joy. Enrico Caviccioli was dozing and dreaming aloud. I feel my 20-year-old body growing younger. I'm returning with ever more infantile footsteps to the cradle. Soon I'll re-enter my mother's womb. Everything then is permitted. I want expensive playthings to smash, cities that I can flatten, human anthills to kick over. I want to tame the winds and put them on a leash. I want a pack of winds, fluid greyhounds, to hunt the flaccid, bearded cirrus clouds. The breathing of my sleeping brothers imitated the sleep of a powerful sea upon a beach, but the inexhaustible enthusiasm of dawn was already pouring down the mountain flanks. So copiously had the night spilled its heroic essences and perfumes everywhere. Paolo Buzzi, brusquely hoisted up on a tide of delirium, twisted as if in the uneasy grip of a nightmare. Do you hear the sobs of earth? The earth is suffering in the horror of light. Too many suns have bent over her bedside. We have to let her sleep, longer, forever. Give me clouds, some cloud masses, to cover her eyes and her weeping mouth. At these words from the farthest horizon, the sun offered us its red and trembling steering wheel made of fire. "Get up, Paolo," I cried. "Grasp the wheel. I proclaim you the driver of the world. But alas, we won't be equal to the great task of the futurist railroad. Our hearts are still full of filthy rubbish, peacocks' tails, pompous weathercocks, fancy perfumed handkerchiefs, and we still haven't emptied our brains of the lugubrious ants of wisdom. We need madmen. Let's go and free them." We approached the walls, flooded with solar joy, flanking a sinister valley, where with a cry, 30 metal cranes hoisted railroad cars full of smoking sheets, the useless linen of those pure ones already cleansed of every stain of logic. 2 psychiatrists appeared, categorically, on the threshold of the palace. I held nothing in my hand except a blinding automobile headlight, and it was with its polished brass handle that I dealt them both their death. From the wide-open doors, madmen and women poured out by the thousands, shirtless or half-naked, a torrent, enough to rejuvenate and give new color to the earth's wrinkled face. Some of them immediately wanted to brandish the shining bell towers like ivory batons. Others began to sit in a circle and toss around the cupolas like balls. The women were combing their remote cloud tresses with the sharp points of constellation. "Oh, madmen! Oh, our deeply beloved brothers, follow me. We'll build the railroad over the summits of the mountains, all the way to the sea. How many are you? 3,000? Not enough. For boredom and monotony will cut short your initial impetus. Let's go ask for advice from the beasts of the menageries clustered around the Capitol gates. Of all beings they're the most alive, the most uprooted, the least vegetal. Charge! To the city of gout, to gout." So we set off, a mighty discharge from an enormous sluice gate. The army of madness advanced from plain to plain, descended the valleys, and swiftly climbed the peaks with the fatal yet easy rush of a liquid between two communicating vessels, finally machine gunning the walls of the city with screams, foreheads, and fists until they rang like a bell. The gesticulating tide made the guardians drunk or else killed or trampled them. Then it flooded the immense, muddy corridor of the seraglio, whose cages, full of dancing tresses, swayed in the vapor of savage urines, or were swung about in the hands of the madmen as lightly as canary cages. The reign of the lions rejuvenated the capital. Their manes rebellion and the swelling arches of their backs sculpted out the facades. Their torrential force dug up the pavement and transformed the streets into so many tunnels with open vaults. All the fistic vegetation of Gout's inhabitants was baked to a crisp in their houses, which, full of howling branches, trembled beneath the hailstorm of dismay that riddled their roofs. With sudden leaps and the mine of clouds, the madman mounted the beautiful indifferent lions, who hardly perceived them, and those bizarre horsemen exulted in the quiet swishing of the tails that continually threw them to the ground. Suddenly the animals pulled up short. The madmen fell silent before the walls that no longer moved. The old ones are dead. The young have fled. All the better. Quick! Strip off the lightning rods and statues. Plunder the strong boxes brimming with gold. Ingots and coins. All the precious metals will be melted down for the great military railroad. We ran outside with the gesticulating madmen and the disheveled madwomen, with the lions, tigers, and panthers being ridden by naked horsemen who were rigid, contorted, or exhilarated by their inebriation. The city of Gout was now nothing more than an immense vat full of red wine, whirling and foaming, seeping out furiously from the gates whose drawbridges had become shuddering, roaring funnels. We crossed the ruins of Europe and entered Asia, scattering the terrified hordes from gout and paralysis, like a sower tossing the seeds with a huge sweeping gesture. Part 3. At darkest night we were nearing the heavens, standing on the Persian plateau, sublime altar of the world, whose boundless steppes bear populous cities, endlessly aligned alongside the railroad. We were panting over crucibles of baryt, aluminum, and manganese, and from time to time they frightened the clouds with their dazzling explosions, while the majestic patrol of lions, prowling in circles, their tails erect, their manes flying with the wind, were carefully surveying us, piercing the black and deep skies with their reverberating white roars. But little by little the faint and warm smile of the moon peeked over the tattered clouds, and when she finally appeared, dripping with the intoxicated milk of acacias, the madmen felt their hearts jump right out of their chests and ascend toward the upper surface of liquid night. Suddenly a loud cry pierced the air, a noise rang out, and everyone ran in its direction. It was a young madman with pure eyes, struck by lightning on the railroad tracks. His corpse was immediately hoisted up. Between his hands he was holding a white and desirous flower, whose pistil quivered like the tongue of a woman. Some wanted to touch it, and it was evil. For then, with the motion of dawn stealing over the sea, a sobbing verdure rapidly rose from the earth, which was curling now with surprising undulations. From the fluctuating blue metal slowly emerging was the vaporous hair of countless women who were swimming, sighing, and opening the petals of their mouths and their moist eyes. Then in the intoxicating flood of perfumes, we saw a fabulous forest growing and spreading around us, its foliage arching downward as if fatigued by a lazy breeze. A bitter tenderness wavered there. Nightingales were drinking the odorous shadows with deep gurgles of pleasure, and from time to time they broke out laughing in their nooks, playing hide and seek like lively, mischievous children. A soft sleep was slowly overcoming the army of the mad, who began to howl with terror. The wild beasts impetuously hastened to help them. 3 times the tigers curled as tight as balls. Their claws poised with explosive rage, sprang on the invisible phantoms which bubbled up in the depths of that forest of delights. Finally a breach was forced, an enormous convulsion of stricken foliage, whose drawn-out moans wakened the distant loquacious echoes hidden in the mountains. But as we insistently tore at the clinging, affectionate lioness, to free our arms and legs. All at once we felt the carnal moon, the moon of warm, beautiful thighs, languidly surrendering herself to our weary hearts. A cry went up in the airy solitude of the upper plateau. Let's murder the moonlight. Some of us ran to nearby waterfalls. Gigantic wheels were hoisted, and turbines transformed the velocity of the waters into electromagnetic spasms that climbed up wires suspended on high poles until they reached luminous, humming globes. So it was 300 electric moons with rays of blinding, chalky whiteness, canceled, the old green queen of love affairs, and the military railroad was built, extravagant railroad that followed the chain of higher mountains over which our vehement locomotives plumped with sharp screams, hurtled from one summit to another, plunging into precipitous depths and climbing everywhere in search of famished abysses, absurd turns, and impossible zigzags. All round in the distance, unlimited hatred marked our jagged horizons of refugees. They were the hordes of gout and paralysis whom we tossed head over heel into Hindustan. Part 4. Hot pursuit. The Ganges had been crossed. Finally, the impetuous heaving of our chests had rooted the creeping clouds in their hostile entanglements, and on the horizon we discerned the dark green throb of the Indian Ocean, over which the sun was fitting the fantastic golden muzzle. Stretched out in the gulfs of Oman and Bengal, it was perfidiously preparing an invasion of the land. At the tip of the promontory of Cormoran, edged with slime containing whitish bones, behold the ass, colossal and emaciated, whose grating parchment rump had been bowed down by the delicious weight of the moon. Behold the learned ass, its prolix member patched up with writings, that from time immemorial braze its asthmatic rancor against the mists of the horizon, where three great motionless vessels were advancing, their masts like the vertebrae columns seen in X-rays. Suddenly there appeared the immense herd of wild beasts, rid by the madmen, straining their countless snouts over the waves, beneath the vortex of mains, that were calling out in the ocean to join in a reconquest. And the ocean answered their appeal, arching its enormous back and shaking the promontories before it would spring up. It tested its strength for a long time, moving its houches and flexing the sonorous belly between its vast elastic foundations. Then with a great heave of its loins, the ocean lifted its own mass and surmounted the angular lines of its shore. Then the fearful invasion began. We were marching within the grand circle of the pawing waves, huge drops of white foam whirling and collapsing, showering the back of the lions. They arrayed in a semicircle around us, were all adding their fangs to those of the ocean, to its hissing spray and roars. Sometimes from the heights of the hills, we would watch the monstrous edges of the ocean gradually swelling, like an immense whale that was driving ahead on a million fins. And it was we who led it all the way to the Himalayan chain, spreading all the swarming, fleeing hordes like a fan that we wanted to smash against the sides of Gauri Sankar. Hurry, my brothers. Do you want the beasts to overtake us? We have to stay in the front ranks, despite our slow steps, and keep getting bogged down. The devil take these sticky hands and feet that seem to be dragging roots. Oh, we're just wandering trees. What we need is wings. Yes, let's make airplanes. Let's make them blue, the madmen cried out. Blue, the better to conceal us from the enemy's observation and merge into the blue of the sky, the wind-driven sky that flaps up on the mountainous peaks like an immense banner. And so, to the glory of the Buddha, the madmen grabbed the deep blue mantles from the pagodas to construct their flying machines. We cut our futurist airplanes from the ochre-colored cloth of sailboats. Some had wings that were balanced and carried their motors, and they were rising like a blood-spattered vulture that lifts a thrashing heifer into the sky. Look, my own multicellular biplane with a tail that guides it, 100 HP, H cylinders, 80 kilograms, and between my feet I have a tiny machine gun that I can discharge by pressing a steel button. And so we take off, in the inebriation of an agile spin move, our flight proceeding with the lively chugging, yet as light and rhythmic as a sun inviting us to dance and drink. Hurrah! At last we're really worthy of commanding the great army of madmen and unchained beasts. Hurrah! We can dominate our rearguard, the ocean, with its tangle of foaming cavalry. Charge, you madmen and madwomen. Charge, you lions, tigers, and panthers. Charge, you squadrons of waves. Our airplanes will be on your side, sometimes as banners of war, sometimes as passionate lovers, delicious lovers who swim with open arms above the waving foliage, or who softly linger in the oscillations of the breeze. But look up there, to the right, those blue shuttles. It's the madmen swaying their airplanes in the hammock of the south wind. Meanwhile, I'm sitting like a weaver before his loom, weaving the silky blue of the sky. Oh, how many fresh valleys and surly mountains beneath us. How many herds of rosy sheep scattered on the flanks of the green hills that are offering themselves to the sunset. Oh, my soul, how you used to love them. No, no, that's the end of it. You'll never enjoy such insipid things again. Never. The reeds that we once shaped to shepherds' pipes have now gone to form the framework of the plain. Nostalgia, triumphal inebriation. Pretty soon will overtake the inhabitants of gout and paralysis, despite the headwinds gusting straight at us. What does the anometer say? The headwind is blowing at 100 kilometers per hour. So what? I'll go up to 200 meters and fly right over it. Look at the hordes. There, they're in front of us, and now they're already under our feet. Look down there, right below us, between the bunches of greenery, the violent madness of that human flood intent on fleeing, the smashing sound. It's the crashing of trees. The enemy hordes are already being crushed against the walls of Gaurisankar, and now we're battling them. Do you hear? Do you hear our mortars applauding? Oh, great Indian Ocean, now is the time for you to reconquer the land. The ocean was solemnly following us, leveling the walls of the venerated cities, and casting down the illustrious towers, old horsemen of sonorous armor, who've already fallen from the marble arches of the temples. At last, now we have you in front of us, the teeming populace of gout and paralysis, a disgusting leprosy that's devouring the mountainsides. We're flying swiftly against you, flanked by the galloping lions, our brothers, while at our backs we have the menacing friendship of the ocean, following close on our heels to ensure that we don't hold back. It's just a precaution, for in fact we're not afraid of you, but you're numberless, and we might run out of ammunition or grow old during the course of the slaughter. Let me direct our fire. I'm raising my sights to 800 meters. Ready, aim, fire. Oh, the intoxication of playing marbles with death. And yet you can't take away from us. Are you still lagging behind? This plateau will soon be behind us. My airplane is running on its wheels, skating along, and now it's rising again in flight. I'm flying against the headwind. Bravo for the madmen. Continue the massacre. Look, I've cut off the motor and I'm gliding down quietly, with magnificent stability, to land where the fight is raging hottest. Here is the furious copulation of battle, the gigantic vulva stirred by the friction of courage, monstrous vulva that spreads open the better to offer itself in the terrific spasm of our coming victory. It's ours. The victory is ours. I'm certain of it because the madmen are already tossing their hearts into the air like bombs. I'm raising my sights to 100 meters. Ready, aim, fire. Our blood? Yes, all of it, in big clots, to recolor the sickened dawns of the earth. Yes, we know to warm you between our smoking hot arms, O impoverished sun, decrepit and chilled, shivering on the summit of Gaurisankar.